So hello and welcome to the video. Virgin Atlantic today. Now I remember when Virgin Atlantic started operations back in 1984. That's 40 years ago, and they were a textbook disruptor, moving into a stodgy, uncompetitive industry to compete against BA that was a stodgy, self-entitled, state-owned monolith. Beardy Branson brought charisma, guerrilla marketing, glamour and a sprinkling of innovation to services across the Atlantic. And BA really didn't like it, and I remember the Dirty Tricks campaign that dragged on into the 90s. I flew with Virgin a couple of times in the 90s, including a couple of trips in their upper class cabin, and whilst I didn't have an enormous frame of reference for premium cabin travel back there, I really enjoyed it. Now Virgin must have done a lot of things right to still be operating 40 years later. There are lots of disruptors who aren't. But is Virgin still the funky disruptor they used to be? Their marketing department would want you to believe that they are, but does that match up with the reality today? In 1999, Singapore Airlines bought 49% of the company, a shareholding they sold to Delta Airways in 2012. And in 2023, Virgin joined SkyTeam. That all sounds pretty corporate and mainstream to me. Now I flew on Virgin a couple of years back and I wasn't overwhelmed by the experience, although we were still in the shadow of the you-know-what when I flew with them. But it made me wonder whether Virgin is now a mainstream airline, given that they are now looked upon as mainstream by many, given that they have a mainstream owner, and given they sell flights in a mainstream alliance. So today and again next week I'm flying Virgin in upper class to and from New York, and I'm really interested to see whether they are still the funky disruptor they started out as. Today's flight was going to be on their new A350, flying back next week on their even newer A330-900, but the equipment has changed. But I got lucky. Instead of a downgrade to the clapped out old 787, it's an upgrade to the new A330 in both directions. So if you'd like to see what the Virgin experience is like in 2024, stick around. Hi, I'm Matt and this is Matt's Planet. I aim to entertain, educate and inspire with my travel adventures from planning to execution. I'll show you how you can travel in style for a lot less than you'd think. So subscribe so you can come with me. So when Virgin started operations, they branded their premium cabin as upper class, which was actually a very sensible thing for them to have done. They didn't want to call it business class because they thought it was better than that. And calling it first class would have been a bit of a stretch because, particularly 40 years ago, first class still really meant something. Calling it upper class was a really clever way of differentiating themselves. And even though it's still called upper class today, people do still call it first class, although maybe in these examples they're doing that just to generate some extra clicks. Anywho, so one perk of travelling in upper class, and something that does make it feel first classy, is that if you're departing terminal in upper class, you have access to a little private mini terminal. Now this is only accessible by car, so I've jumped off the tube a couple of stops early, here in delightful Hounslow Central, to jump on an Uber for the last couple of miles, so I can have that experience and share it with you. Right, let's go and find an Uber. It turned out to be wildly expensive to get an Uber for the 5.4 remaining miles to Heathrow, £24 in total, so you can imagine I was moderately irritated when, despite my very clear instructions and directions, and despite the location being a separate drop-off point in the Uber app, the driver drove straight past the entryway to this private area and dropped me at the main passenger entrance. Nah mate, this is the place. No mate, it isn't. So 25 quid in an Uber, and the bloke missed the drop-off point. He drove straight past it and then refused to go all the way around to have another go at getting in. So I guess that's 25 quid wasted, and we'll try the traditional check-in process. I've not always been impressed by Uber's customer service, but I really was irritated by this, so I lodged a complaint with them when I reached the lounge and was very pleasantly surprised when Uber refunded me the fare within 10 minutes of the complaint going in without quibbling. So well done, Uber. And as it turned out, you could still access the drop-off area even when arriving on foot, something I'll share with you in a moment. I mentioned there'd been an equipment change for this flight. The A350 I'd booked onto has 12 more upper class seats than the A330 I'd been switched to, so Virgin had emailed me 3 days before I travelled, inviting me to change to a flight departing 12 hours earlier. That wouldn't have worked for me, but if I'd accepted the switch, they offered to thank me with either a £500 Virgin travel credit, valid for 3 years, or by adding 50,000 points to my Virgin account. Interesting that they are valuing their points at 1p in that offer. I thought that was underwhelming and was perhaps also a little sneaky, as Virgin would have been on the hook for a payment of £520 in real proper cash, not in travel credit, had they bumped me or anyone else off the flight in a way that delayed our arrival by 4 hours, plus perhaps the cost of overnighting me at Heathrow. Their offer may have worked for some, but it wasn't appealing to me. This was a redemption booking, and I don't know how Virgin ranks travellers when needing to bump people, so I'd communicated my desire to travel as vigorously as I could by checking in online as soon as I was able to, 24 hours before departure. I still wanted a physical boarding pass though, so stopped at the desk and all was good. With boarding pass in hand, I was confident I was actually going to fly. Up in the special upper class lift to their private security lane, and you can easily access that vehicle drop-off area from here. It really is quite nice. You can still book a Virgin chauffeur. The good old days when a transfer was included in the upper class fares are long gone, and better cab and Uber drivers will know where this is. Some nice aircraft models to welcome you. A lovely facility if you're able to use it. Back around to the private security lane, which I didn't film, I can report that they have the new style scanning machines too, so whilst the powers that be are still concerned about liquids in your luggage, the inconvenience was minimal and I was through in minutes. Up to this point, if you compare Virgin's private wing in T3 with BA's first wing in T5, the Virgin Experience pips BA's, as it's so few steps from your car to the far side of the security point. Beyond security, BA pulls level and probably nicks it overall as you enter their lounge directly from the security lane. In T3 it's by no means a marathon, and if you want to pick up some duty free, Virgin gives you the opportunity, but the terminal's layout does inconvenience you with a moderate hike to get to the Virgin Clubhouse. A 2.5 minute hike to be precise, as I can report from the timestamps on my videos. For some reason, Virgin's not making a huge song and dance about their 40th birthday, but there was an interesting display of their uniforms over the ages, something they have put a lot of effort into. And it was a very warm welcome by the desk team and through into the lounge that was really quite busy. First stop was a sit-down restaurant, as I was more than peckish by this point. A glass of the champagne to start, of course. I want to say Nicholas Foyate, but I hesitate to do so, mainly as it's a hard name to pronounce, and also because I didn't note down the brand at the time. Delicious though. The lounge didn't look that busy from this angle. The menu in the lounge was decent. British and traditional would probably be the words to characterise it, curries being quite a traditional British offering these days. Nothing to get too excited about, I thought, but I went for the fish and chips and was very happy I did so. I've shared this clubhouse with you before, although a couple of things have changed. The pool table in this area has gone, as has the Peloton bike area. The lounge gets really rammed, so both of these changes free up space for more seating. But a lot hadn't changed, including this outdoor space, which very few people seem to find. It was delightful up there that day. It's less fun in February, but well worth a few minutes of your time if you're passing through. The Instagram wall is still there, not sure how many seats they could add if they took this down, but the Peloton area now has 6 or 8 seats. And there are 3 yoga spaces, which I don't remember seeing before. I also remember some of the seating being a little tatty and run down last time through, but I didn't get the same feeling this time. My flight departed in the late afternoon, so the lounge steadily quietened as the afternoon went on. I was still a little peckish, so ordered a cheese plate. It wasn't exactly snack-sized, it has to be said. Cute that the board was embossed with info on the cheeses. The suppliers must love this, as it makes it really hard for Virgin to change cheeses. And when the lounge was much quieter, I enjoyed a cheeky old-fashioned at the bar. The clubhouse really is very good. All of the staff were great. They seem to be grown-ups that you actually want to talk to, rather than the sort of minimum wage school leaver you can get in other lounges. I'm not thinking of BA specifically with that comment, I will add. Virgin has a very strong drinks offering, lots of cocktails available at the bar, although the food offering could be a little bit more upmarket, and any lounge will struggle to feel premium when it's standing room only, as I believe it can be during the morning departure rush. I don't include Virgin's Heathrow Clubhouse in any conversation about the best lounge in the world. Indeed, I'm not sure it's in the top 3 of Heathrow lounges, given it's competing against Cathay, Qatar and Emirates facilities. But it still strongly reflects the Virgin brand by being quirky, relaxed and a fun place to spend some time. It was a decent walk to the gate 19 that evening, but I timed it brilliantly as I got there just as the upper class cabin was being boarded. So I hardly broke stride through that final boarding pass check and all the way onto the plane. A separate boarding finger for the forward cabin too, which is always nice. Into the cabin and I was in seat 1K, a new plane but a similar lighting strategy to the A330 with the pinkish LED lighting. A 1-2-1 configuration for 8 rows, producing 24 seats in total. All have aisle access, so all of them are essentially the same, except for 2. The big selling point of this version of Virgin's upper class cabin is the central 2 seats in the first row, which aren't intruded upon by the row in front of them, so have quite a lot more space. Virgin has branded these as retreat suites, and sells them as a £300-ish upgrade when selecting your seat. They don't have foot cubbies, the screen is bigger as it's actually a bit further away from you, and there is a bit more storage actually located towards the front of the seat. If you're travelling as a couple, this is a good option, although £600 or even £300 if you're on your own feels like a lot of money. I thought long and hard about paying for the upgrade, and I would have been very happy if I'd been upgraded into one of these seats if Virgin hadn't sold them, but on balance I'm happy to review the seat that 22 people will experience in this cabin rather than one that 2 of you can buy into. So the seat I actually did travel in looks like this. First impressions are not bad at all. It's a straight ahead seat rather than being angled towards the window or the aisle, so the odd numbered rows are distanced from the window versus the even numbered rows which are snug to them. I must confess I hadn't really noticed this when picking a seat, and I didn't really notice it for much of the flight, as the seat's framing means you still feel separated from the aisle even if you're closer to it in an odd numbered row. A good sized screen is in front of you above the foot cubby. Seats 1A and K are no different from the other seats in that regard. And beside you is a largish surface which covers the feet of the passenger behind you. Over your shoulder are seat controls, a literature slot, a universal power socket and 2 types of USB port, and a storage cabinet already full with headphones and a bottle of water. And that's where this seat starts to baffle me. It reflects Virgin's very latest thinking, what they think is the perfect business class seat, yet the storage available to you is pitiful. That cabinet is the only closing space. There's 2 open storage areas here and here, but you can't use them during takeoff and landing, and you probably don't want to use them at other times in case you experience turbulence that could throw stuff out of those spaces. They do have small lips which mitigates the risk a little, but they're really not ideal. You may use the headphones and drink the water, freeing up space in that cabinet, but it's still not huge even if you do. It is baffling that the storage space provided is so minimal. Another look at the connectivity, and I read from other reviews that this shelf offers wireless charging, although I didn't notice the charging logo at the time, and you can't really see it here. There's a small piece of the armrest that pops open to reveal a remote for the entertainment system. I preferred the touchscreen, but those with shorter arms will value this accessory. The tray table pops out of the side unit and is quite small and felt a little flimsy too. You'd need to be a contortionist to get out of the seat with the tray table deployed. Again, these are all things that other airlines don't accept and have engineered solutions to, but Virgin seems happy to accept this. 2 windows per seat, and they were extremely clean. The plane is a 1.5 years old, so that's not perhaps a surprise. I found out after the flight that this plane is named Queen of the Skies, which annoyed me a little, Virgin nicking the nickname of the 747 for this smaller and inferior A330 doesn't feel right. Overhead air vents and lights though, so full marks there. A pre-departure beverage. Now on the flight back this was described as sparkling wine rather than champagne, and in both directions I didn't see the bottle and it was not fully chilled, hence my reaction here. A decent pour, but it really wasn't the best. Virgin's safety video follows the cartoon/comedic approach and was okay, but probably wasn't quirky or innovative enough to capture and hold everyone's attention. One thing I don't understand is the need for a 3-point safety belt. When a seat is aligned off the plane's axis, like BA's Club Suite, a 3-point belt is required. This can alternatively be an airbag in a lap belt, which some American airlines adopt. But as this seat faces straight ahead, like the Q Suite, it shouldn't really need a 3-point belt. The Q Suite doesn't require one. If you know why Virgin needs a 3-pointer, let me know in the comments. And I'm aware that the negativity is building up somewhat. We pushed back just a few minutes late, and it was a shortish taxi to the runway, but there was a fair bit of traffic at that time of day, so it took a few minutes for our turn to come, but soon enough we were off and up into a very pleasant London evening. A flight time of 7 hours and 21 minutes, which was a little longer than average, but that's just more time to enjoy the experience. You'll have noticed a menu and amenity kit was pre-distributed, so let's take a look at them. The amenity kit, goodie bag, was okay, nothing overwhelming in there, but you get the stuff you need: an eye mask, socks, ear bungs, toothbrush and toothpaste, and 3 potions: face cream, hand cream and lip balm. And the menu, I'm going to be negative here again. A choice of soup or a cheese and tomato salad starter, truffled chicken, buttered fish or a salad for main, with 2 dessert choices and a cheese plate. 24 seats is not a massive cabin, but I don't feel that this is an adequate menu for a premium cabin. Now Virgin probably understands this, so heavily publicised an online menu that you could pre-order from. It's not Singapore Airlines Book the Chef, but it does add a few options to the 3 that were offered on board. Like the food in the lounge, there was really nothing life-changing in here, and nothing you wouldn't find offered in that half-decent gastropub you've got down the road. But I'd pre-ordered the butter chicken and was quite looking forward to it. I'll come back to the second meal, and as for wines, there were 3 sparkling options. That Prosecco was probably the pre-departure beverage, with 2 whites and 2 reds. That's an acceptable range, I think, and these wines retail for £10 to perhaps £18 per bottle in the UK. And a good spirits range, offering a cognac puts Virgin well ahead of BA in my eyes, as BA has delisted theirs. Meal orders were taken, and shock horror, they had no record of my pre-ordered butter chicken. Apologies were offered, but there was no explanation, and I can only assume that the equipment change deleted my selection, although it's extremely poor if that was the reason. Since getting home, I've actually had an unspecific apology email from Virgin, which I assume concerns this issue, although it's so vague and generic I can't be sure. I am yet to decide whether I can be bothered to go back to Virgin with a more significant complaint. I really don't like stuff that's been truffled, it's just too rich for my palate, so I went for the fish. Service started with the drinks round, a gin and tonic for me, served with a small bowl of crisps. Very tasty crisps, but a small bowl, and whilst this was a nice change from the traditional nut offering, crisps are a lot cheaper than nuts, and it didn't feel particularly premium. Far fewer calories in crisps too. To start, that salad sounded too boring for words, so for what may be the first time ever I ordered soup on a plane. It was okay, quite a small serving, but tasty enough. Notice that blue table protector. It's more of a placemat than a tablecloth, but it was laughably small, and I just didn't understand what it was supposed to be doing. The fish duly arrived, and again it looked like a small serving, but my word was it rich. Butter sauce with sea bream rather than sea bream with butter sauce. I ate it as I was hungry, but as we'll see, this dish did not sit well with me. I'm not a dessert fan, but I felt unsatisfied from the meal I had had. The calorie count was probably quite high, but 75% of them came from that butter. I'd already had a plate of cheese in the lounge and was not keen on consuming any more dairy, so I went for the chocolate and blackberry thing, mainly to take away the taste of all that butter. And it was good, but overall I thought the meal choice was poor and it was all quite boring. The truffle seemed to be a way of making chicken interesting, and the butter was a way of making the fish interesting, but it just didn't work for me. Ironically, I'd have much preferred the fusion dish of butter chicken that I'd taken the time to order. I went for a wander after the meal and checked out the loo. Dark panelling made the space feel quite smart actually, to the extent any airplane lavatory can be smart. And I wandered up to the back of the plane and it was pretty busy back there. 242 in economy, tapering to 232 right up the back, and premium economy is 232 throughout. Another feature that you'd assume reflects Virgin's very latest thinking and their plan for the future is the loft, a social space at the rear of the upper class cabin intended to be a place for passengers to congregate. There was a very small range of snacks available, but I was expecting this area to offer a range of beverages from those fridges. Indeed, in earlier iterations, this space was a full bar, although that required staffing, so the concept has been downscaled to what I believe would be a self-service space. There were a wide range of beverages available in the galley aft of the loft, which was manned by a crew member whenever I passed through, although this space seemed to get far more use from the premium economy passengers. But the seating in the loft was really uncomfortable. The seats were high, with minimal depth and next to no padding. I struggled to sit comfortably in one for more than a couple of minutes. I've read that Richard Branson thinks they should bring back the bar. He's right. I couldn't understand what this space was supposed to be, and it just didn't seem to work. A social space is a good idea, but on a plane as small as an A330, you either have to really commit to it or not bother at all. It was around now that I started to feel a little peculiar. I readily acknowledge, and you've all seen, that I'd drunk a fair bit by this point, but I know my body and I'm convinced that something about that meal had not agreed with me, and I'm pretty confident it was the fish that was the culprit. I don't think there was anything wrong with the fish itself, but the butter it was delivered in was so overwhelmingly rich that my stomach decided to rebel after the calorific onslaught. I'm sure the alcohol didn't help, but it was not a pleasant few hours through to landing. I tried the flatbed, which was good, but I'll talk about that more in the video about the flight back when I had a proper sleep. I closed the door, which is a very positive and welcome feature of the seat, which does a good job of separating you from the aisle, even when you're in a seat closest to it. I'd intended to use this part of the flight to look at the in-flight entertainment, but I think I fell asleep, so I'll also share that in the video about the flight back. Indeed, I don't remember much about those last few hours, except for having to make quite a few dashes to that quite smart loo. I'll spare you the details. When it was time for the second service, I was either asleep or was looking so green that the crew didn't even offer me anything, although I didn't notice anybody else eating anything either. Fortunately, by the time we were landing, I was awake and holding things together enough to get some footage out of the window. We landed 1 minute ahead of schedule, but were a couple of minutes late reaching the gate. I have global entry, but there's a new feature that I hadn't used before. Crossing the border with global entry can be a 2-minute process, but you can shave a whole minute off that by using an app to take a photo of yourself rather than having it done by a kiosk in the arrivals hall. You register your arrival through the app, then take a selfie when you land, and when the app approves it, your validity to enter the country is transmitted to the border agent who, as we'll see in a moment, waves you straight through. So a preliminary summing up of the Virgin experience. I'll come back to this in the video of the return leg, where I'll also talk about how much this trip cost me. I asked the question of whether Virgin was still the disruptor they once were, that their marketing team wants you to believe they still are, or are they now a mainstream airline that beyond the funky LED lighting is actually no different from anyone else? Well, the answer to both questions is yes. They do look and feel different, but they are also now a mainstream carrier. They call things different names. It's upper class, not business. It's a goodie bag, not an amenity kit. But these things are still mainstream. It's a cabin and a bag of amenities. They use bold colours and there's a strong focus on design, but it's still cabin lighting and they're still uniforms. They hire Virgin people who are quirkier and more engaging than a lot of the crew you'd find on other airlines, but they're still flight attendants. If you want a design-led, quirky experience that projects a sense of rebellion against the mainstream, then you'll love Virgin. But if you're looking for an airline to get you somewhere, Virgin is a mainstream offering. The problem is, I don't think they're a particularly good mainstream airline. The ground experience is very good and the clubhouse is borderline excellent, no issues there. But on the plane, things are far from perfect, and remember, this A330neo reflects Virgin's very latest thinking as to what it wants its offering to be. The seat is good, it's probably great, but it's not world class. The lack of storage is a serious issue, and whilst it's a step up from the poorly built seats on the A350, there are better seats out there. I think the Club Suite and Q Suite are better, and the Finnair Air Lounge seat is significantly better. If Virgin was true to its branding, they would have been all over those Finnair seats, as they are genuinely quirky and different, and they would have been perfect for the Virgin brand, and they'd look fantastic in Virgin Red too. The menu was weak and the food served was dinky and a bit boring. The butter gave it flavour, but it gave me all sorts of other things as well. And the loft, well, it's a bit of a joke. It just doesn't work in my and Richard Branson's opinion. More in the next video, but back to my immigration experience. I was a bit naughty in letting my camera run, but I hope the US Department of Immigration will appreciate me showing how effortless the entry process can be with global entry. It took me 5 minutes to get from the plane to the global entry lane, and then about 20 seconds to get into the US. And it only took that long as the agent took a few seconds to find me on his list.
What's your first name?
Matthew.
Matthew. Yeah, you're good.
Thank you. Then, with no bags to collect, I was out of the terminal in another 2 minutes, plane to curb in 7.5 minutes, immigrating through what can be the worst airport to arrive at in the whole United States. And that's pretty flaming good if you ask me, and well worth the cost of global entry enrolment, even if you're only a very occasional traveller to the United States. So thanks for watching, and look out for my review of that return flight, which will be along in a week or two. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing if you like this sort of content. Plenty more on the channel, with plenty more coming. If you'd like to support what I'm doing more directly, there is a Patreon account. And leave me a comment, have I got the opposite of rose-tinted glasses on when I look at Virgin? So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.